The call came at 3:47 a.m. I know because I was already awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if tonight would be the night. 30 years of 3 a.m. phone calls will do that to you. Your body learns to expect the worst when the world goes quiet. Ma'am, we found him behind the Walgreens on 5th Street. I didn't cry. I should have, but the tears had dried up somewhere around year 15. Instead, I felt this strange relief, like finally exhaling after holding your breath for 3 decades. My son Danny died with a needle in his arm and my phone number written on a piece of paper in his pocket. He was 45 years old. I know what you're thinking. Another addiction story, another broken family. You've heard this before, but here's what nobody tells you about loving an addict. It's not the drugs that kill you, it's the hope. Danny first got high when he was 15. Stole pills from my medicine cabinet after his wisdom teeth surgery. I found him passed out on his bedroom floor, blue around the lips, and I thought my world had ended. I had no idea it was just beginning. The next morning, he cried. Real tears. The kind that break a mother's heart into a million pieces. I'm sorry, Mom. I don't know what happened. I'll never do it again, I promise. I believed him. Of course I believed him. He was my baby. That phrase, I'll change, became the soundtrack of the next 30 years. Sometimes it was whispered through tears in a hospital bed. Sometimes it was screamed during family interventions. Sometimes it came in letters from jail, written on paper so thin you could see through the lies. But Danny had this way about him. Even strung out, even stealing from me, even breaking every promise he'd ever made, he could look at you with those green eyes, his father's eyes, and make you believe that this time was different. I enabled him. I know that now. Every time I bailed him out of jail, every time I let him back in the house, every time I gave him just $20 for food, I was feeding the monster that was eating my son alive. My husband Mark left when Danny was 23. Couldn't take it anymore, he said. You're choosing him over me, Sarah, over our marriage, over your own sanity. He wasn't wrong, but how do you explain to someone who isn't a parent that you can't just stop loving your child? That even when they're destroying everything you've built, even when they're stealing from you, even when they're lying to your face, they're still the little boy who used to bring you dandelions and call them flowers. So Mark left, and it was just me and Danny and his promises. I'll change, Mom. I'm going to get clean. I'm going to make you proud. I heard those words so many times they lost all meaning, like saying your own name over and over until it sounds like gibberish. The worst part wasn't the stealing. It wasn't finding needles in his old bedroom or getting calls from the police at all hours. The worst part was the glimpses of who he could have been. There were moments, God, there were beautiful moments, when he'd get clean for a few weeks or months, and I'd see flashes of the man he was supposed to become. He'd help me in the garden. He'd tell me about books he was reading. He'd talk about getting his GED, maybe going to community college. And I'd think, this is it. This is when he finally changes. But addiction isn't a straight line. It's a circle, a loop. And I spent 30 years riding that loop, getting dizzy from all the spinning, but never getting off. When Danny was 30, he overdosed for the first time. Really overdosed, not just passing out, but blue lips, no pulse, the whole nightmare. The paramedic told me later that he was technically dead for 2 minutes. That should have been my wake-up call. That should have been the moment I realized that all my love, all my enabling, all my desperate hope was just keeping us both trapped in hell. Instead, I doubled down. I refinanced my house to send him to a fancy rehab center in California. $28,000. He lasted 6 days before he walked out and hitchhiked home. I'll change, Mom. That place wasn't right for me. I'll do it on my own this time. I believed him. Again, my sister stopped talking to me. My friends got tired of the drama. My life became smaller and smaller until it was just me and Danny and his broken promises. I retired early because I couldn't concentrate at work. Every phone call might be the call. Every time he was late coming home might be the time. I lived in a constant state of almost grief, mourning a death that hadn't happened yet, but felt inevitable. Danny tried to get clean probably 50 times in 30 years. 50 different rock bottoms, 50 different epiphanies, 50 different versions of I'll change. And I believed him every single time. Not because I was stupid, not because I was naive, but because the alternative, accepting that he might never change, felt like giving up on my child. And what kind of mother gives up? Turns out, sometimes the kind who actually wants to save them. I learned too late that there's a difference between supporting someone and enabling them. There's a difference between love and codependency. There's a difference between helping and hurting. Every time I bailed Danny out, I robbed him of the chance to face real consequences. Every time I cushioned his fall, I prevented him from hitting the bottom he needed to hit to finally climb back up. My love was killing him, and it was killing me too. The last time I saw Danny alive, he was asking for money. Again, his face was gaunt, his clothes hung off his skeletal frame, and his once beautiful green eyes were hollow and desperate. "Just $50, Mom. I'll pay you back. I swear. I'm getting into a program next week. I'll change. I promise." For the first time in 30 years, I said no. He stared at me like I'd slapped him. Then he got angry. Then he got cruel. He said things that can't be unsaid, things that still echo in the quiet corners of my house. "You were never a real mother anyway. Dad was right to leave you. You're just a pathetic old woman with nothing else to live for." I watched him walk out my front door, and something inside me knew I'd never see him alive again. But I still hoped I was wrong. Even after everything, I still hoped. 3 weeks later, the phone rang at 3:47 a.m. The detective was kind. He'd clearly done this before. He told me Danny had been clean for 4 days before he relapsed. That's the thing about heroin. Your tolerance drops when you get clean, but your desperation doesn't. He used his normal amount on a body that couldn't handle it anymore. 4 days clean. In 30 years, that was nothing. But maybe if I'd said no sooner, if I'd stopped enabling sooner, those 4 days could have been 4 years. Or 40. I buried my son on a Tuesday. The cemetery was quiet except for the sound of dirt hitting wood. Only a handful of people came. Addiction isolates everyone, not just the addict. Standing there, looking at his casket, I realized something that should have been obvious decades earlier. I'll change isn't a promise. It's a delay tactic. It's a way of avoiding change by talking about it instead of doing it. Danny probably meant it every time he said it. But meaning it and doing it are two completely different things. And I spent 30 years confusing one for the other. If you're waiting for someone to change, really waiting, organizing your life around their potential transformation, I need you to hear this. They might never change. And while you're waiting, while you're hoping, while you're enabling their dysfunction in the name of love, you're both drowning. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes the only way to save someone is to let them save themselves. Sometimes I'll change means I'll change when I have to, not when I want to. I spent 30 years waiting for my son to change. He spent 30 years knowing he didn't have to because Mom would always be there to catch him when he fell. If I could go back, I'd love him just as much, but I'd love him differently. I'd love him with boundaries. I'd love him with consequences. I'd love him enough to let him fail. Maybe then that phone call would have been him telling me he was 1 year clean instead of the coroner telling me he was gone. I'm 60 now. I learned this lesson 30 years too late. Don't wait, don't make my mistake. Love them enough to let them change on their own, or not at all. Because I'll change is often just a loop. And some loops, once you're stuck in them, never end.